Papua New Guinea, 1942. Australians called them fuzzy wuzzy angels. Angels with curly hair and steady courage. Local villagers carried wounded soldiers through dense jungles. They moved across harsh terrain without hesitation. They saved countless lives without seeking reward. They wore no uniforms and earned no medals. They were forgotten heroes of another nation's war. Huntington Beach, California, 1928. Oil derricks rose quickly during the booming rush. They spread across the sand like metal forests. Where waves once ruled, drills pierced earth. Black gold surged upward, promising sudden fortune. The American dream carried the scent of oil. Industry reshaped the quiet coastal horizon. The city's destiny shifted with every strike. In Japan during 1954, Marilyn Monroe visited wounded soldiers who had been evacuated from the Korean War. Her fame entered a quiet military hospital ward. She planned to entertain troops stationed overseas. Instead, she saw men broken by battle. Celebrity brightness met the shadows of conflict. A famous smile confronted war's unforgiving reality. Mary Vincent was 15 in 1978 California. A stranger attacked her while she hitchhiked. He violently assaulted her and severed both forearms. He left her in a ravine, expecting death, but she refused to surrender to fate. She climbed out despite unimaginable pain. She reached a roadside and found help. Against all odds, she survived. In New York during 1903, two boys faced cruelty. Their guardian and aunt ruled through violent abuse. She stood next in line to inherit wealth. One child's scalp split after requesting a bandage. Fear and silence surrounded their young lives. Help finally arrived through a protection society. Authorities stepped in to stop the brutality. The photograph preserves a grim chapter in history. The photograph captures a troubling chapter in American history. Members of the German-American Bund stand publicly assembled. They raise swastikas beside United States flags. Their rallies promoted Nazi ideology before wartime involvement. During the 1930s, sympathizers operated on American soil. They marched in formation wearing coordinated uniforms. Queen Victoria formed a close bond with Abdul Karim. He was her young attendant from India. Their friendship unsettled and angered the royal court. She regarded him with deep maternal affection. He introduced her to the Urdu language. After her death, the family rejected him. They removed him from the home she gifted. He was sent back to India quietly. For decades, efforts were made to erase him. During the 2000s, LAN parties defined gaming culture. Basements and bedrooms turned into buzzing arenas. Players hauled heavy desktop towers across town. Fast internet was still unreliable or rare. Competition required gathering in the same room. Network cables stretched across crowded floors. Screens glowed through long, sleepless nights. A generation bonded through shared digital battles. In Paris during 1956, police detained several women. They sat confined inside a transport vehicle. The arrest followed a crackdown on prostitution. Some remained quiet, holding uneasy composure. One woman faced the camera boldly. She stuck out her tongue in protest. Even restrained, she claimed a moment of defiance. Human dignity resists easy confinement. In England during the 1980s, excess defined high society. At a London party, a woman danced on a table. She lifted her dress boldly before wealthy guests. The era reflected Thatcher's rapid economic changes. New fortunes rose with striking speed. Displays of wealth grew louder and more extravagant. In Oregon during 1939, hardship shaped daily survival. Thomas Cave tattooed his Social Security number. It became his only reliable proof of identity. The Great Depression erased steady work and hope. Jobless and uncertain, he sought farm labor. He and his wife picked beans for wages. Desperation marked his skin permanently. Millions endured similar struggles throughout the 1930s. This is among the earliest toys ever discovered. It dates between 5,500 and 3,000 before Christ. The artifact is displayed in a Turkish museum. Around 7,000 years ago, a child held it. Small hands once imagined stories through this object. The urge to play reaches back to humanity's beginnings. On March 8, 1971, history unfolded in New York. Joe Frazier floored Muhammad Ali in round 11. It was the legendary fight of the century. Back in his corner, he showed no celebration. Exhaustion left him barely able to stand. Victory came at a brutal personal cost. 15 relentless rounds reshaped modern boxing. Neither fighter left that ring unchanged. In Pueblo, Colorado during 1905, crowds gathered eagerly. Tall platforms rose above waiting water tanks. Horses were driven to leap from great heights. Some dives reached nearly 60 feet. The spectacle was promoted as thrilling amusement. Audiences cheered as the animals plunged below. Behind applause, fear filled the falling creatures. Amanda America Dixon entered life through brutal injustice. Her mother was enslaved and only 13. Her father was her 40-year-old owner. She was born into a divided, hostile society, yet she reshaped the course of her future. When her father died, he named her sole heir. His fortune made her among Georgia's wealthiest women. The inheritance challenged Southern beliefs about race and lineage. Around 1900, a mixed-race family sat for a portrait. Their union defied harsh social expectations of the era. Many states outlawed interracial marriage at that time. Laws and prejudice sought to erase such families. Still, they chose to stand before the camera. The photograph became a quiet act of courage. Their presence endured despite widespread hostility. On March 21, 1947, police answered a complaint. They entered 2078 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. Inside stood mountains of debris and clutter. Amid the chaos lay the Collyer brothers. Homer and Langley had lived in isolation for years. They gathered more than 140 tons of possessions. Langley built traps to shield his blind brother. One device collapsed and killed him. Homer later died from starvation alone. Joe Arity was known as the happiest inmate on death row. With an IQ of 46, he grasped little. He could not comprehend the punishment awaiting him. In 1939, he walked toward the gas chamber. Beforehand, he gifted his toy trains to another prisoner. For his final meal, he requested ice cream. Decades later, evidence cleared his name. Vindication arrived far too late. "If I fail, he dies," warned a wartime poster. It captured the fear of the 1918 influenza pandemic. Red Cross volunteers stitched protective masks tirelessly. They hoped to slow a deadly spreading virus. More than 50 million lives were lost worldwide. There were no vaccines or reliable treatments. Communities relied on hygiene and strict isolation. On Wall Street in 1918, crowds marked victory. Charlie Chaplin lifted his arms before cheering crowds. The most famous tramp in cinema stood triumphant. America celebrated the defeat of Imperial Germany. The Great War had come to an end. 20 years later, another global conflict would rise. Chaplin would ridicule a mustached dictator on screen. In the United States during 1923, agents staged a raid. They seized barrels filled with illegal alcohol. Prohibition had begun in 1920 nationwide. The ban would last until 1933. Thirst did not disappear under strict legislation. Instead, drinking moved into hidden spaces. Bootleggers and gangs gained immense profits. Organized crime expanded during those 13 years. In Berlin, during 2002, a startling moment unfolded. Michael Jackson stepped onto a hotel balcony. He held his infant beyond the railing briefly. A cloth partly covered the child's face. Crowds below reacted with alarm and disbelief. Images quickly circulated across global media outlets. Many questioned the judgment of the pop icon. She entered life as a royal daughter. In 1915, Alexandrine Irene of Prussia was born. She had Down syndrome from birth. Society often concealed children who were different. Noble households guarded reputations with strict silence. Her parents chose another path. They loved her openly before the public. Their stance challenged prejudice in a harsh era. In Washington during 1952, a tense trial unfolded. A witness appeared covered by a sheet. The cloth concealed identity from public view. The case centered on serious drug trafficking charges. Threats of retaliation weighed heavily on testimony. Justice required anonymity to protect the speaker. Sometimes truth survives only behind hidden faces. Freddie Mercury left most of his estate to Mary Austin. He often called her the love of his life. Though openly gay, their bond remained profound. In his will, he expressed deep devotion. He believed she would have been his wife. She stood beside him through illness and decline. After his death, she guarded his ashes privately. Some relationships defy simple labels. In Ramla prison during 1961, a notorious figure walked. Adolf Eichmann crossed the courtyard under guard. He had organized transports to extermination camps. Millions of Jews were sent to their deaths. He managed genocide with bureaucratic detachment. His crimes were framed as administrative duty. Months later, he faced execution by hanging. In Minnesota during 1918, tension gripped communities. John Meese, a German-American farmer, was attacked. Neighbors targeted him for his heritage. They covered him in tar and feathers. Wartime fear fueled violent suspicion. Anti-German hysteria transformed neighbors into aggressors. Patriotism twisted into cruelty and public humiliation. In Drenthe during 1936, a rural family posed. They stood before a house built from grass and peat. The dwelling was modest, yet carefully constructed. Life there demanded endurance and steady labor. Despite hardship, their dignity remained visible. Years later, the Netherlands would symbolize prosperity. Back then, farmers shaped homes from the earth. In 1889, veteran lumberjacks tackled massive trees. They worked with axes and relentless determination. Each towering trunk demanded strength and precision. Safety measures were minimal or non-existent. One mistake could end a life instantly. The labor seemed reckless and often proved deadly. In Japan during the late 19th century, samurai assembled. They faced the camera with solemn composure. Modern reforms were reshaping their ancient order. The warrior age was stooped by industrial change. Firearms and factories replaced swords and armor. Within decades, blades became ceremonial relics. Bushido survived mainly as memory and tradition. Off the coast of Korea during the war, surrender unfolded. 3 communist fighters approached in a small fishing boat. Moments earlier, they had been armed adversaries. Now they lifted their hands in submission. Conflict had fractured nations, loyalties, and families. In that instant, ideology seemed distant. They were simply exhausted men seeking survival. In Beijing during 1958, crowds gathered at the Summer Palace. They banged pots to drive sparrows from the sky. The action followed Mao's Four Pests campaign. Rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows were targeted. The effort nearly wiped out the birds. Without sparrows, insects multiplied unchecked. Crops suffered severe damage across fields. Famine followed, claiming millions of lives. On the Chukchi seacoast in 1976, a rare encounter occurred. Explorer Nikolai Michulik approached a polar bear. he offered food to her and her cubs. Trust briefly replaced fear in the Arctic wilderness. The Soviet North was usually harsh and unforgiving. Predators there rarely tolerated human presence. The scene felt almost unreal against that backdrop. In Colorado, on April 20, 1999, tragedy struck. A Columbine student, Dustin Gorton, collapsed in grief. He learned the attackers had been his friends. 13 people were dead, the nation stunned. Shock spread through classrooms and communities nationwide. He faced a haunting, unanswered question. How had the warning signs gone unseen? In Vietnam during 1968, fighting raged fiercely. Amid the Tet Offensive, chaos consumed cities. An American Army chaplain guided an elderly woman. He helped her move toward safety. Uniform met civilian vulnerability in that instant. Compassion surfaced within a brutal conflict. The photograph distilled war into one human gesture. In Rio de Janeiro during the dictatorship, unrest filled streets. Police pursued a fleeing protester through the city. He stumbled and fell amid the chase. The regime responded to dissent with force. Students and activists faced harsh repression. The image freezes a moment of authoritarian brutality. In Iran during 1925, Reza Pahlavi took the throne. The former military officer crowned himself monarch. He had toppled the previous ruling dynasty. His coronation marked the start of a new era. He established a family line to govern Iran. That dynasty endured for several decades. In 1979, revolution ended his son's rule. During the 1990s, a sporting legend shared a quiet moment. Soviet water polo star Petr Shvenaridze held his grandson. The Georgian powerhouse once dominated Olympic pools. Opponents had feared his strength and presence. Now he cradled the next generation gently. Time softened the champion's fierce image. Stories of triumph would outlive his playing days. In Zanzibar during 1896, enslaved people stood chained. Britain had ended slavery within its homeland, yet colonial systems still exploited forced labor. Iron restraints contrasted with imperial rhetoric. The scene exposed contradictions of so-called civilization. Power and hypocrisy were captured in one frame. In 1940, HMS Vidal battled towering Atlantic waves. The vessel climbed a crest like a fragile speck. North Atlantic crossings tested every sailor's resolve. Storms there had swallowed ships without warning. The war against German submarines was relentless, yet the ocean itself proved an equal enemy. Nature and conflict combined into one perilous struggle. In 1933, prisoners labored outdoors under supervision. An armed guard stood watch nearby. The scene was photographed by Doris Ullman. Her lens often focused on marginalized communities. The image captures discipline, hardship, and quiet endurance. In Kentucky during 1946, Dillard Eldridge sat with his children. They gathered inside a modest 4-room house. Monthly rent cost only $9. The Belva coal mine had closed after an explosion. Work vanished, leaving families without steady income. They remained in aging homes built decades earlier. Hope lingered for jobs that would never return. On Everest in 1996, Beck Weathers was presumed dead. Teammates and rescuers left him in the storm. Hours later, he regained consciousness in darkness. Nearly blind, he forced himself to stand. He staggered through brutal cold toward camp. Frostbite ravaged his face and hands. Several fingers were later amputated. Against all odds, he survived. On the Western Front during World War I, soldiers experimented. They tested an observation post shaped like a tree. Trenches stretched from the Channel to Switzerland. In Kentucky during 1946, Dillard Eldridge sat with his children. They gathered inside a modest 4-room house. Monthly rent cost only $9. The The Belva coal mine had closed after an explosion.